You are tuned in to the first episode of Solo Live. Today's guest is Joel Goodman, and my co-host is Tonya Oak-Smith. Solo Live is a show that spawned from the higheredsolo.com blog, and we're here just to sort of bring this conversation about individuals who work in small offices or solos, armies of one, to you during your lunch hour. So I'm going to pass it on to my cohort, Tonya, to talk about
Hey,
how we got here.
hey, I'd like to thank everybody first off for tuning in to the first episode. Um, we're really, really happy you're here. We're also happy that Joel's here. And we thought we'd start off, first of all, by introducing ourselves. I'm Tonya Oak-Smith, Marley's mom, on Twitter. And I am the Director of Communications at the UALR, William H. Bowen School of Law in Little Rock, Arkansas. Um, my co-host and cohort and partner in crime, as I like to call him, is Ron Bronson. So tell
I,
us a little bit about yourself.
I am Ron Bronson, and I am currently the webmaster at Eastern Wyoming College in Torrington, Wyoming, is the actual place. Do wonderful things. And I am a solo in an army of one, and have been for several years in several different roles, which is how this whole little thing came together. And so,
Yes, Ron and I met at a conference and we talked about the fact that we were both by ourselves and responsible in large part for lots of things, sometimes all the things. For me, it's all the things that have to do with communication internally and externally at my school. And Ron has responsibility for all the web things
web
at
things,
his
video
school.
things, web things, video things, social media things, other things as assigned.
And so we complained to one another and we continued the conversation online and offline, and eventually Higher Ed Solo was born. There we try to produce a series of helps and conversations with other solo practitioners and small team members, talking to them about their business pains. Y'all can tell I haven't always worked in higher education because my lingo, business lingo, creeps in sometimes. We talk about business pains and we interview you guys and we want y'all involved. That's the most important thing, is establishing a network where we can help one another. And one of the things that we've discovered as we move along on this solo path is that freelancers and solo artists, for lack of a better way to put it, solo practitioners, have a lot in common, and that's why we decided to bring Joel on for this first show. Other than the fact that Joel is a friend, and we've worked with him on projects before, and he's an all-around awesome guy. He is the principal at Bravery Transmedia. And Joel, tell us a little bit about Bravery Transmedia and your background, because your background is in higher ed too.
Sure, yeah. Hey everyone, glad to be back on another Higher Ed Live show, and especially with two of my favorite people, Ron and Tonya. I do own a small shop called Bravery Transmedia, and we're located in Austin, Texas. But prior to me moving here just a little bit over a year ago, I was working in higher education. I worked at Trinity International University, just north of Chicago in the suburbs, Deerfield actually specifically. I was there for about 2.5 years, handled everything that had to do with the web. So that was design, marketing, getting content together, CMS transitions, you name it.
Stop for a second.
All
Apparently
right.
we're not live on the site. Oh
Are we
wait,
not?
no. Lori says we're live on YouTube. Sorry guys, if anybody's watching us on YouTube.
Oh, the embed code.
Um,
Okay.
the embed code needs to be updated, Ron.
Okay, I will get on that. It's our first episode, folks. We're learning. We're going as we learning as we go.
All right then.
Sorry, Joel.
No
Continue.
problem. Yeah, so I was working at Trinity International University and did anything that touched the web, and that came down to even CMS migrations and all the work that goes into planning that kind of stuff. And then prior to that, I was at Greenville College, just east of St. Louis, for about 3 years. Did largely the same sorts of things, web writing, got them up and running on the various new forms of social media because they were new at the time. And yeah, just a lot of organization of getting things up and running on the web. And apart from that, I was doing a lot of freelance work on the side for different design studios, specifically one called Department 3 out of Los Angeles, and we built WordPress sites for bands and management companies and all sorts of people, fashion designers and musicians and everything else. And I really decided a year ago I wanted to see if I could step out of the kind of the mire and the politics and the I don't know, the constant fighting that has to happen to do really cool things that I think probably a lot of you that work in higher education experience day to day as a solo practitioner. I want to see if I could get outside of that and put the efforts and things that I was spending time on into helping those people. And so now I'm here in Austin. I work with a few different institutions off and on, and a lot of startups that are here in town, a lot of tech companies, and it's interesting to see the parallels, because a lot of the work that I do for the companies here in Austin and startups around the country, the same methods and things cross over to when I'm working with a college or a university at the same time. It's a lot of fun. I like being able to help people in higher ed do the cool things that they want to do, but just feel like they can't get done on their own.
So there's a lot of similarity and synergy and things between freelancers and solo practitioners. And a lot of the times, I know for myself, I depend on freelancers to do some of the things that I can't. For instance, I bring someone in to work on video for me. I bring photographers in not because I can't take pictures, but because I can't take really great pictures. I can go take a suitable picture at an event, but I can't take pictures that I want to use for brochures and things like that. So explain how solos and small teams, Joel, can work best with freelancers. I mean, I know there has to be some trick, some little thing that we do.
Sure. Yeah, I went through the same process. When I was working alone as a team of myself on the web, I knew what I wasn't particularly strong at, or the places that I was most strong and that my time could be better used, and so we would bring people in the same way. Yes, I own a digital SLR camera, but I do not take the same sorts of photos as someone who does this every day and is a photojournalist or goes out and shoots for colleges and universities and businesses every day and has really great work. And so whenever I had the opportunity to do it, I would try and bring in freelancers, because we just didn't have the resources to do it in-house. And so the way that I always viewed it when I was actually in higher ed was that it's a way to augment and strengthen those areas that you don't feel 100% competent on. And I think that's important, because you want to make yourself look the best you possibly can. You want to make the institution you're working for look as best as it possibly can. And sometimes it's saying, you know what, instead of saying we're going to put out a job search and wait 2 or 3 or 4 months and spend a whole bunch of money plus all the HR and benefits packages that have to go into hiring a person, take a chunk of money from the budget and say, okay, we have one particular goal that we can bring someone in for. Let's pay them and let's get it done quickly. That's another benefit of freelancers. They don't want to be stuck on a project for 5 or 6 or 7 months or a year, especially not one small project. So we get in and we want to get it done, and we want to get it done quick, and we want to get our clients happy and honestly get paid, because that's how we put food on the table. That's how we take care of our families and continue to do more work. And so I think the key is to recognize where, I don't even want to call them weaknesses. I think we as solo practitioners are all generalists, and so we have a lot of strength in a whole lot of different areas, but there are definitely ones where we feel that we excel better than we do in other ones, you know. So like I always felt my design chops were a lot better than my actually sitting down and programming. And yeah, I can build a WordPress theme and I can do some HTML and CSS and JavaScript, but when it gets down to fighting with a CMS, it could take me 4 weeks to get something done that I could hire someone to do in 2 days. And so I would rather bring that person in and get it done in 2 days, because then I can get on with other stuff. So fill in the gaps. That's what I think hiring freelancers is about.
So, but tell us about your workflow, because I think we've discussed in the past how you have to be really self-driven and self-focused, and when you're a solo and when you're a freelancer, because you don't have anybody in particular riding your behind telling you you've got to complete this part of the project. So how do you make a timeline for each project? When we sit down to meetings with you or any other freelancer to hire them, how should we approach that first meeting, I guess? Let's start with that.
Yeah, so my end-to-end process it's fairly standard. We have a couple of little quirks in our process that help us think better, and I think kind of set apart the Bravery way of thinking through projects. But we first want to sit down with a client and really hear about the project. Not so much that you have to have a complete formulated idea and plan of action, everything that you need done, but that you have goals figured out. You know what you want to accomplish with what you're doing. If you have design direction, you know, if we're doing like a design project and you've got wireframes, that's awesome. If you don't, that's awesome too. We want to use that time in that initial meeting to pull out the important parts of the project so that we understand what we can help you accomplish. You know, from there we get everything hashed out. We, you know, do all the necessary items of like signing agreements and figure out price and setting a timeline. And I personally have to work to deadlines. I think I learned that from being a solo practitioner. I need a hard stop. And so I use that as a target. And you know, sometimes things get in the way and we have to push that target back. It could be that, you know, if we're doing a full end-to-end design development web project, design takes an extra week, you know, because someone doesn't like it. And ultimately, if I'm working with a college or an institution, that happens a lot. There might be someone that gets pulled in at the last minute because they think they absolutely need to make a call on a design, and so they change something, and so we have to tack another week onto it. I think a good freelance or contractor will communicate those things up front to you and be very clear in their communication throughout the process. So we set up a timeline. We say here's the hard stop. It could be, you know, 5 weeks in the future. It could be 2 months in the future. It can be, you know, whatever we decide based on the scope of the project. And then depending on the different aspects of it, we will usually set up when the different pieces need to end. So okay, design, we're going to allow 2 weeks for design, you know, and I'm generally pretty quick with design, so I get revisions out. A lot of it is the give and take between myself and the client, because if, you know, for instance, Tonya, let's say I'm working with you, and you know, you have, you know, I get a design out to you, but that day you've got meetings all day long, and you know, something explodes on your campus, and you know, you've got to take care of stuff. Well, not literally.
We don't let things explode on my campus.
Sure, you know, something takes up all of your time for an entire day, and you're not able to get, you know, maybe it's 2 or 3 days. You know, maybe it's something that's pretty important. You're dealing with media and all the stuff that you have on your plate, and you're not able to get down and sit with the designs and look through them and give me feedback on them. That's fine, you know, but those affect the timelines that we have. And so one of my favorite people in the world, his name's Wayne Kijanowski. I worked with him at Trinity International University. He's just the nicest guy I've ever met. But he used to talk about this all the time. It's reshuffling the deck. You know, it's like, okay, we've got all these pieces that we have to do, but there's always going to be something that comes up, and so we have to reshuffle the deck and figure out, okay, what's the most important thing that needs to happen at this point. And so, if there's a break that happens in the design process, then I can still be sitting there and working on some other things. Maybe we're doing some IA work as well. So I might sit down and kind of figure out what our navigation structure is going to be, where all this content and information is going to go on your website or whatever. But there's that give and take. If I take too long, I can't really extend a deadline because I take too long getting feedback or getting a design out to you, because that's on me. I can fudge the date a little bit if you guys have something that comes up as a client, and in most cases clients are understanding of that. It's it takes time to do this stuff. So I think an understanding on both sides that the time each person or each side has to take in getting their part done affects the final outcome of it. Then after we finish each phase, we kind of do a sign off. I like to work in distinct blocks. I think it's helpful for everyone. I personally am pretty fluid in the way that I do things at home, but it's nice for me to say, okay, here is a hard stop on this certain package of the project. Design is done. Let's go do something else. Let's start coding it out. And once that's done, you guys actually, as clients, have the deliverable to say to whoever's in charge of the project, or whoever you have to report the project to. Okay, we have this piece done, and so there's actually progress being made in this project. We haven't hired a freelancer, and he's sitting back, and we're waiting. And I think that's one of the harder parts with hiring third parties. Whether it's a freelancer, whether it's a large agency, whether it's anything, it's on us to be very communicative about where we're at in the process, so that you can report those sorts of things to the higher ups, the people that need to know, and make sure that they're not just dumping their money down a sink or a toilet or something and nothing's actually getting done. And then when we get towards the end, we can, I like to go through a, kind of like a guarantee of you will be happy with my work. And so we, if something's wrong, then let me know and we fix it. And I think good freelancers do that. I hope good freelancers do that. I feel like I'm a good freelancer. So, yeah.
Okay. Let's bring in a comment, and then we've got another question. Andrew up in Canada. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Andrew.
Finds, you called yourself a generalist and talked about solos as generalists earlier, Joel, but he kind of takes umbrage with that.
Okay.
I worked in a big 25-cent word there, y'all. Explain the difference between somebody who has like a subject matter expertise and in an area and is good in the area that they're talking about. For instance, I would consider myself a writer first and foremost. I can code a little bit, and I can take pictures, and I can do the other things, but I think I'm a subject matter expert in the writing area. So,
Yeah.
how can we balance those things out with freelancers?
So the reason I use the word generalist is actually because I know it can be a controversial term. I last year read this really great article, and I'm going to see if I can find a link to it so that you guys can read it too, about how the world belongs to generalists. That it's not a bad thing. And certainly it doesn't mean that generalists are the whole jack of all trades, master of none sort of deal. I think I am a jack of all trades in a good way. I think there are ones that I really do have an expert set of skills in, but there are many, many others that I have maybe not expert, but professional, like a professional level of skill in. I think we have to be generalists. Even if we're experts in one area, we have to be generalists to be able to cope with all the different things that come at us as solo practitioners. I think that, if you're a solo web worker specifically, if all you're doing is changing content on a website, and there's other people handling all the other aspects of the website stuff, then you're not really a solo practitioner. You have a team that you can fall back on. If a real solo web worker is going to be someone that is having to either to at least comment on the design of things, and is going to have to be fighting for what goes on the website, and it kind of is the expert in that, even if you don't feel like you're an expert. And so, I feel like I'm a designer first and foremost, but I also have been speaking at tons of WordPress things this year and do a lot of WordPress stuff, and some people would consider me, as a WordPress person first, if not a designer. And I think it depends on how you view generalists. I think generalists are great because generalists pretty much run the world right now. So yeah, I think did I answer the question, Tonya?
I think so.
Okay.
I think that yes, and I have always considered it an advantage to be a generalist, because not only can you, if somebody is in a pinch and you need to do something, you can at least do it with some level of competency, but you can supervise people and you can understand when they're BSing you. And I think that's an important thing as a solo, to understand exactly when somebody is pulling the wool over your eyes.
I agree. I totally agree, and I think that's spot on about how you pick the right freelancer, or how you pick the right minion if you're hiring student workers, or how you I think you need to be well versed in a lot of areas, even if you actually have a specialty. Even if you are an expert in something else, the generalist aspect, I think it's important.
And I think it's also, not only in the solo realm, but think about interactions that you have as a technical person. If you're, I'm looking at you guys out here in the ether, the interwebs. If you know something about the tech that you're working with, and a developer or a designer or something else who is in your office comes to you and says, it's going to take me a month to do this, and that's total crap, then you can call them on it and you can deliver something for your organization that is much more responsive to exactly what you need, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Yeah, I personally, I've found that a lot, where because I have somewhat of an understanding of programming and CMS structure, because I picked up all these things. I mean, honestly, I'm not a designer by training. It's just something I've been doing as a person since I was in junior high. The first time I got a hold of Photoshop, it was like, oh, cool, and I started making stuff, and now it's kind of the primary thing that I do. And I mean, my background's in marketing. It's in communication, and my master's is in media studies, and that was all about rhetoric and semiotics, and again, communication. And that's where my background is. But I'm able to, as a generalist, I'm able to convert those into communicating well. I was always kind of a bridge between the people that had absolutely no idea what was going on with code and the people that had no idea what was going on with design, and being able to to kind of cross those and say, okay, we've got this cool design, we can totally do this, and I can actually do this, and we don't have to call on this programmer that's super busy working on an email conversion or something. And it's totally helpful. You're able to build better relationships, which I think for I can't imagine any solo practitioner watching right now would disagree with me saying that having good relationships with people across your campus is only beneficial to your job. But if you're able to communicate that way and translate things, people like you more, or maybe they don't like you more, they at least take you seriously and understand that, okay, you're making an effort to understand what I do, I'll make an effort to understand what you do, and maybe you can become the glue that holds everything together. And I honestly, especially at small institutions, that's the solo people are the ones that really hold everything together, because they're thinking through all that stuff and making sure that things work. It's the chewing gum and duct tape thing.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, actually, hi, I'm still here, guys. I didn't mean for you all. I meant for our audience. Probably wondering, wait, did Ron just like leave or something? Nah, I'm still around. Um, Joel, so question I have for you is, people might be wondering. I've had this conversation with folks recently, about freelancers and how you find people who are doing
Sure.
certain things. It's like, because there's so many folks out there.
Yeah.
How do you, I'm gonna say you're a freelancer, but I mean, as someone who's marketing to people, and
Yeah.
as someone who has friends, we have colleagues and things like that. I feel like the question might be, how do I find a freelancer? How do I find a good freelancer? Something probably we can talk about more, but I'm curious, as someone who's in that role, who's switched
Sure.
over from the higher ed side, how you might answer that.
Well, I'll say that 90% of it's actually dropped a little bit in the last couple of months because of some of the other work that I'm doing, but probably like 85% of the clients that I pick up, for Bravery are friends of friends or direct friends. It's people I know, and so I mean, there are places you can find freelancers, and I'll get into them. But my number one recommendation is ask people that you know, if they know anyone, if they've worked with anyone, because chances are they have, or they know someone who has. And if you trust their taste and you trust their quality of work, sort of a thing, like where they're, I guess I think of it as like a taste level. Like if you look at them and you're like, okay, they know what quality is, they have high standards for what they do. Anyone that they pick is going to be a pretty good candidate to look through. I think that's the best way to find someone that a freelancer that A, you can trust, and B, will do the work to the level that you need it at. I think apart from that, there are a lot of job boards that put this stuff out. I don't think you'll find many freelancers that are higher education specific. I don't know that that's a good or a bad thing. I think it really depends on the person. It's probably better if they at least like went to college and understand like the nuances of communicating and marketing to kids that are wanting to go to college, or to adults that are wanting to go back to school, or wherever your focus might be. And you can find those, places like the who is it? The makers of Basecamp. Why can't I ever remember that?
30.
Yeah, 37 Signals. Like, they have a job board. You can go and look for, like, they list people. You go to, like, if you want design, like Dribble.com has like people that sign up for Pro, which pretty much the designers that are wanting work will sign up for Pro because they can say whether they're available or not available. You can search through them and look for people that are hiring. And that's nice because it gives you a sense of looking at their portfolio. You can talk to me. Plug for my business. I'm always taking new clients, and I'm the sort of person where if I don't have the time, I probably know someone. I think that's one of the benefits of working with a freelancer as well, is that in general, they're going to know people that excel in other parts. So if they don't have time or they don't quite fit the project, they should be able to direct you to someone else. And we try to do that whenever we can. If I don't have time for a project, or we just don't see that we can help you to the best, like as hopefully someone that is trustworthy, I'm not gonna fake it and say, oh yeah, we'll give you whatever you want. We can't really do it. I'll point you to someone who can and can give it, give you what you want. And I think just connecting again with people that know not the industry, but know the goals and the field that you're wanting to hire a freelancer in is great, because then you can just shoot out on Twitter, hey, anyone know who does this sort of thing, and they can probably direct you to someone. I think the person to person or friend of a friend aspect is probably the best bet, and then otherwise search for like freelance job boards.
Well, the thing too that, and this is to interject into this line, that I'm a member of professional organizations for communicators, and so I find that people who do the same thing, it's kind of akin to build on what Joel was saying earlier. I talk to people who do what I do and who are generalists like I am, and I say, hey, I've got this photography project and I want to take pictures of my professors in the classroom. So, they know, oh, I've worked with this photographer who shoots concerts, so maybe that's akin to, you know, what you're doing. You want action photos or something like that. Um, and I think the recommendation process in that way is very important, you know. So
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree.
now, what do you think is the most important thing about your workflow, Joel, that solos or small teams can pick up from that and use? Um, I mean, I have an opinion on that, but I want to see what your opinion is on it.
Yeah, I think that there's two that go hand in hand. I think that how scheduling your projects out is really important. Not for necessarily the reasons that you think, like not to keep yourself on track, which it might be that way. But I think the number one most important over all this is the communication side of it. Is making sure that you're communicating where you're at on projects with whoever needs to know that. I don't know very many solo practitioners that are able to just kind of like lock themselves in their offices and just work without anyone bugging them. I mean, someone's going to have a question about the project at some point. And so being able to say, okay, this is where I'm at, this is when this part's going to be done, and being able to communicate that openly helps a lot. And I learned that from actually working, in a higher ed context, where I was working on projects that were like cross-organizational. So as I might have been in the communication and marketing organization, but I was working on stuff that affected them and also affected IT and their staffing. And so I need to be able to communicate things, across both lines. And so, if there isn't a project manager that's kind of making sure that you're on task, you need to be able to communicate where you're at in the process of a project and what those people can expect. And I think having the timelines helps for that. I think if you can scope out the work, depending on the project, and say these are all the little pieces that we need to do, and this one's done and this one's not. The whole time tracking kind of project management sort of thing is very helpful, more for communication purposes than for yourself. And maybe for yourself as well, but I think the communication side of it's probably the most important, because if people are sitting there questioning, oh, are you really getting something done, you're not only endangering your reputation for it, for being a good worker, but you're also just kind of frustrating them, and that's only going to make your job harder. And so, give people as few reasons to complain about your work as possible, and you'll be happy.
So I want to interject right now. Does anybody who's watching have any questions? We've tweeted out for questions. If y'all want to tweet at us, you can tweet to Higher Ed Solo or Higher Ed Live, and we'll see you, or either one of us individually. I'm Marley's mom or Ron Bronson. Thanks for tuning in. Got any more questions, Ron? Comments?
Ron, you want to just comment on my work since we've worked together?
We actually have, and it's interesting because I wanted to sort of echo, I'm going to double back a bit on that conversation about relationships. I was talking to someone about this, and one of the things we talked about was, she says, I feel like I should be able to list all the people that I know on my resume. And it was a funny conversation, but it's true to some degree that I think that there's a certain asset, a strength that comes from the relationships that you've cultivated. And for the folks that you know, not just because you can name drop, because that's not really all that useful most of the time. What is useful is sort of extend your knowledge base. So, like you talk about freelancing or hiring someone out. If I have a question about something or something I'm not quite, especially being an individual, a solo or something like that, it's great to know you can call a Tonya or you can call one of your other colleagues somewhere else and get the answer to something a lot quicker than, say, going on a message board and hoping that someone will point you in the right direction, or whatever. And so I think that, for all the people that are out there, especially if you work alone or you work in a small office, so you're the only one who does what you do. This is a sort of consistent message that I preach, but it's really important for you to start to cultivate those relationships. I'm not saying they need to be your friends per se, but you really want to make sure that you're putting yourself out there, you're going to these different events, or if you're not able to go to conferences for whatever reason, you're engaging on Twitter. Even if you're just following people, maybe they're not following you because they have a lot of followers. If you just know the people that are out there, folks, and I think you guys would echo this, folks generally are very willing and able, to help. And if they can't help you, they'll pass you to someone who can. But folks are really receptive to, hey, I have a question about this thing. It can't get to you that day, but people are generally good about making time for that. And so it's something that if you feel like, gee, no one knows I'm here, I feel alone, I'm by myself, there is a larger community. That's one of the benefits to, say, working in higher ed versus a corporate environment where folks know I'm not. If I work at CNN, I'm not going to give you the keys to the secret sauce at MSNBC. Sorry, but with higher ed, even though we're competitors, there's a lot more collaboration and so collegiality that comes from working together. And so I just wanted to sort of echo that a bit. As far as working with Joel, working with a freelancer in this situation, we just did a redesign at Eastern Wyoming College. Which was successful, and Joe obviously was a very big part of that. We knew from the start that we would need, we had a budget that we had, and it was, I guess relatively limited, and we knew that there were certain things that we wanted to do, and, we met those goals. We did some research. Obviously, having sort of knowing people in the field sort of helped, but we also looked at people I didn't know purposely to sort of compare and contrast and things like that. And obviously, people who were, part of the discussion process thought it was important that someone knew about higher ed, that they understood, sort of the quirks and things like that, and that they understood how school sites work, so that we're not trying to spend months training somebody on how to figure these kinds of things out. From my perspective, this was the first time that I'd worked with a solo practitioner on a project this big before. In the past, the redesigns I've done have been with larger, with actual firms, with lots of people and things like that. And so it was a different challenge. And I think that, what was nice about working with you, of course, is that, Joel understood the process and the workflows and things like that. And of course, we have a working relationship. So it was easy to call and to communicate, a lot with him, especially after we launched or before we launched. Hey, I'm going to call you a lot now and bother you all the time. And we're really good about that. And so you want to make sure that, when you're engaging in these projects and you're starting to make those relationships with whatever company you get with, that you make sure that you understand your institution and understand the challenges that are going to come. Because a lot of times I think that we let the companies set the pace. They provide a contract, they provide the timeline, they provide the workflow, and you trust them to just know what needs to be done. And on some level, that's great, but your institution and understand the needs of that institution, and so you're going to have to make sure, if you know that there's going to be a squeaky wheel in some department somewhere that's going to have a lot of questions, you need to make sure that person is satiated, make sure that their needs are being met if it's going to be a problem for you later. Because Joel knows this, once the work is done and the consultant's finished, you may be able to call them and ask them a question or two, but for the most part, the project's done. It's on you now to make sure that all those other things, the follow-on, everything else is being done. And so you really need to make sure, I think, working with a freelancer on a big project, like I said, like a redesign or something like that, as opposed to hiring someone for just video or just photography, you need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and your institution, starting off and going forward, because if you don't, when you're finished, you may have a lot of extra questions and things that you didn't really think about till it was over. That's where asking people, again, hey, calling someone, even after you contracted somebody, calling someone and saying, hey, have you ever done this before? I don't know, I have questions, and so forth. So that's just sort of my soliloquy on that.
Yeah, well, and one of the things that I try to do, up front to kind of mitigate that, and I think there's always going to be questions, that come up going through it, but we really try to, in scoping out the project, define, who's doing what on both sides, just so that there are as few surprises as possible. And I think that you definitely will run into that, and I always try to be as helpful as possible, because I know that maybe it's just the benefit of working with someone who's done the higher ed thing before. Like I understand where those frustration points are, and so I try to put in safeguards at the beginning, and then also do my best throughout to communicate that stuff. And I think another thing that you touched on, Ron, that's really important is when you're hiring a freelancer or a contract person to work with you, you need to make sure that you get along with them. Because it would have been really bad if I, really didn't like Ron and was really annoyed every time he called me, and I'm totally not because
because I call him a lot, so if he was
he
annoyed,
does.
it'd be a real problem if I did.
He really does call me a lot, and during that project, he called me a lot, and and I mean, yeah, I think that there's definitely some clients that are needier than others, and that just comes with the job of being a freelancer. But I think on the side of the client, it's important to make sure that that you get along with the person, so that so that you're not annoyed by them, for one, because the project's going to be even worse. And when you have 6 or 7 different projects going on from all different angles, you don't want one that's making you mad. But you also want to be able to understand that if another project comes up, you can use them in the future. You can give them a call. You have that solid relationship. I think that a lot of times we put a lot of that weight on the contractor, the freelancer, the agency, the whoever that we're hiring to kind of develop that relationship. And I think that there is a lot of responsibility that lands on that person or group. But I think at the same time, it's important that when we're on the client side of it, that we're working hard to make sure that relationship is good as well. That that we're not having a one-way relationship thing going on. So, yeah.
Right.
Any other questions, Twitter? No?
Yeah, no, I'm looking over here, and I'm seeing people echo you talking about finding freelancers who fit the holes that you need to be filled. Excuse me. Not only the holes that you need to be filled, but I think it's important for when you're working with freelancers to be able to speak the same language, or at least similar to the same language. Joel, I think that you're one of the nice freelancers in that you don't mind being called after everything is done.
Yeah, you won't find out a lot of people, but yeah.
No, when the keys are turned over frequently, that just doesn't, which is fine. It's okay. It's we have to learn as solos how to manage the things that we buy.
I'll just say that there are definitely limits, and I will communicate those limits, but hopefully in a nice way. I try to be nice when I communicate those limits.
Definitely so, and I think that having been on both sides of it too, as an end user, and obviously we were not going to always have this experience. I understood my own limits to saying, okay, I know that you're willing to do these things, but here's what we need, or here's what we need to do, or can we, ultimately, if you've had a good relationship and things are working out, that's where it may be worth it to you to say, okay, a contract did this, but we'll pay you more to do X, Y, and Z because we need that thing.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to dip back into the well, because as we learn with our project, and I've seen with other projects too, and I'm sure you can echo this, sometimes you don't know what you need until you've done it already. You've launched it and you're like, gee, we forgot about this one big thing.
When I was at Trinity, we worked. I managed a CMS migration to .cms, and we did a whole bunch of stuff. Like I had done that before, knew the CMS pretty well, got a bunch of stuff up and running, and then we got into a portion where we were going to basically build out an intranet with all kinds of cool stuff, like targeted content based on the user role and things like that. And there was stuff that I just couldn't do, so I hired Michael Feenan, and I've hired Feenan several times for several different projects as a freelancer because I trust his work. I trust the guy. He and I have a good relationship, and I think it goes a long way. And if you can come back, it's less like hiring a risky oddball third party that you've never heard, the second time you go back to it, because you know the process, how they work, the quality of work, you've probably seen their code if it's a code-based project, their design fits into it. It's more like having like a consistent hire or a contractor or something in your office for no benefits and all that kind of stuff. But I like being a freelancer, honestly.
Yes, but you don't have benefits.
Well, I mean, I do. I just pay for them. They're not really benefits, are they?
No, they're expenses.
Self-provided.
That's true.
You're the CEO. You can negotiate a raise with yourself.
Oh, that doesn't work. Negotiate a rate with the insurance company.
Right.
So is there anything else, any it seems like this generalist with a specialty thing kind of rang true with a lot of people on Twitter. I'm looking at the feed right now, and it seems like we've gotten more comments on that than anything else that was said, you know, during this show. Anything else you want to add to this conversation, Joel?
No. I mean, honestly, well, I mean, you know, I'm always on Twitter. You can, you know, if anyone else has questions, you know, after the show, that's great. We can definitely keep the conversation going. You can follow me at Joel Goodman, and you can follow my business at Bravery Media. And yeah, I mean, if you know, sales pitch, if you've got a project you want to talk about, even if you don't want to hire me, you just want to talk about, you know, ways to go about hiring a freelancer or any of that, you know, I'm happy to talk about that on either side. And I'm sure Ron and Tonya will jump in on any conversation on Twitter as well. So yeah, I mean, I try to make myself as accessible as possible for anything. So it doesn't matter if it's business related or you just want to, you know, argue with me. That's fine too.
He likes to do that.
Also an expert on Winston Churchill for some reason.
Well, maybe not an expert, but I'm working on it.
Such a
Renaissance man.
Yes, absolutely. So I guess we're coming to the end of our first show. I'd like to thank everybody for logging on and sticking with us when we had a little technical issues at the beginning. You can follow me at Marley's Mom on Twitter. I'm always there. In fact, it was funny. Mallory said the other day, how in the world have you tweeted 40,000 times? And I really don't know how that's happened, but I like to jabber. And my cohort, Ron.
You can tweet me at Ron Bronson on Twitter. I've tweeted decidedly less than 40,000 times. But that being said, I am there and happy to chat with you. And you can also follow, of course, both of us at Higher Ed Solo and find us on higheredsolo.com for updates and other kinds of wonderfulness. Summer's kind of a quiet time, but we have a big push coming over the next couple weeks here as the school year ramps up and things like that. So you can start to stay tuned at the site for more updates as well. Thanks for tuning in to our first episode. Tonya,
absolutely. And y'all can tune in tomorrow on Higher Ed Live at 3 p.m. Eastern. That's 2 p.m. Central Time, the normal time zone for everybody. Where Higher Ed Live, Admissions Live, will be talking about international student recruitment. And you can join Ashley Hennigan to talk about that. We encourage everybody watching all the live shows.
I support this wholeheartedly. shout out to Hennigan always. So you should
absolutely.
All right.
Thanks, y'all. We'll see you.
Thank you much. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good week.